Hi, my name is Stacy Stubblefield. I am one of the co-founders of a company called Telesign, and I am here to talk to you today about fraud during COVID. So we're going to go through 3 common exploits that we've seen and heard about during COVID and strategies to combat them. So just before we really dive into each of the different types of fraud, let me give you a little bit of background about Telesign and what we do and how I know anything about any of this fraud. So Telesign was started in 2005 as a two-factor authentication company. So we do two-factor authentication, which is, whenever you're logging into a website or creating a new account on a mobile device, you typically need to put in your phone number and get a code via SMS that you enter back into the website or into the app. And so that is the service that we provide. And we also provide intelligence around the phone number that was provided by your user when they completed the two-factor authentication. We were, like I said, founded in 2005. We now have over 400 employees, and we're doing over 1 billion transactions a month. We work with some of the top web and mobile brands in the world, all across the world. And Telesign was actually sold back in 2017 to a top-tier global connectivity provider, basically a telco called Bix. So that is where I'm coming from and sort of our background. And a lot of what I'm telling you today comes from some of our clients and just what we're seeing out in the industry. So let's move forward and talk about the first exploit that we have seen and heard about. So fake customer support phone numbers. These fraudsters are getting very, they're very creative in some of their types of fraud. And I find this one to be one of the more creative. And so here's an example. So basically, what is this? How does it work? What the fraudster does is they find a company that they want to target. So once they find that company, they will create some toll-free numbers, and they go and they use SEO, or in some cases, they actually buy ads promoting that phone number as being a customer service number for the company. So when a user, a victim, just a random person, is trying to find the customer support number for this company, they go and they type it into a search engine. And what comes back, rather than being the actual customer support phone number, is the fake customer support phone number that the fraudster is promoting. So the victim calls this number thinking that they're reaching the company at their customer support line, but they're actually reaching the fraudster. And the fraudster uses this trust that the victim has, because again, they think they're talking to the right company, and exploits it. They ask them for personal information, they ask them for credentials, they ask them for identity information, whatever they can get away with is what they ask them for, obviously. And then they use that information that they've gathered to go and commit fraud, whatever it happens to be. Obviously, everyone is probably pretty familiar with the types of fraud that you can do with stolen private information. And so that's what they go do. And you can see here on the right of the screen an example of, and I blurred out, I don't want to call out any particular companies, but you can see an example of some customer support numbers that are being promoted by a fraudster for a particular company, which is very dangerous. If anyone calls any of these numbers, they potentially would get the fraudster. And so mitigation, how can you stop this from happening? It can be a little bit difficult, obviously, because this is happening completely outside your ecosystem. So all you can do is really prepare for it. You can't actually be the one to go and stop it and take it down. So how do you prepare for it? One thing that you can do is educate your customers, make sure that they are aware that this type of fraud exists. Another thing, and I think one of the most important, is be easy to contact. Hopefully, if a customer goes and searches for your customer support information, it should be really, really easy to find, hopefully easier to find than the information the fraudster is putting out. Use two-factor authentication. So in case a customer's information does get stolen, you need to make sure that when someone is logging in or when someone is changing their information, in case it's the fraudster rather than the real user, go ahead and send that text message and make sure that the real user is making this change. And then also use detailed messages in the two-factor code. So make sure, and there's an example here on the left, make sure that the text message that you send includes information like, we won't call you and ask for this code, we're not going to ask for this code over the phone, just so the user does not get tricked into giving the code over the phone. So that is the first. Let's go to the second type of exploit, phone number hijacking. What is phone number hijacking? So phone numbers obviously are used in many cases to protect users' accounts. And so fraudsters, are targeting these phone numbers and trying to take them over in various different ways. And so one way that fraudsters take over phone numbers, or one way that they use stolen phone numbers, is they go ahead and they obtain the victim's credentials. So their username and password, and then their phone number. They take over the victim's phone number, typically by calling or walking into a phone company's customer support area, talking to them and posing as the victim and convincing the phone company to give them access to this phone number. So they'll say something like, oh, I lost my phone. Can you please, sell me a new phone with a new SIM card? Typically, they're trying not to spend any money, so they'll just ask for a new SIM card. And then get access to the victim's phone number. Then they log into the website with the user's credentials that they've already stolen, and then they now have access to the phone number, so they're able to log in and complete the two-factor authentication with the hijacked phone number, and then proceed to do whatever fraud they were planning to do. So This can be difficult to detect and difficult to stop. Mitigation. So how do you actually stop this from happening? Well, there's different ways. To be 100% sure that this isn't happening, what you really need to do is check some data about the phone number that the user is doing their two-factor authentication with. So the types of information that you can check are SIM swap data. What does that mean? That means basically the date that the SIM was last changed, the SIM being, the piece of equipment that you put into your phone to get access to the network, which has the phone number attached to it. The last date that it was changed can be extremely important to know, because if it was swapped in the last 24 hours or 48 hours, that is very suspicious. However, if it was swapped, a year ago, 2 years ago, even a couple of months ago, not nearly as suspicious, because most likely that is the real user that's accessing your website and has access to the phone number. You can also check phone porting information. So phone porting being when you move from one carrier to another, that is one thing that fraudsters do sometimes to try to take over a phone number, is actually move your phone number to a different carrier. You can check, very similar to SIM swap, just check the date that the phone was last ported. So if it was last ported yesterday or today, that can be very suspicious. If it was last ported even a week ago, that becomes much, much less suspicious. It's most likely the real person who is logging into the website. So this is the type of data that you can look at. You can also require additional verification. So if you do look up the SIM swap data or the phone port data and you see that it was recently swapped or ported, you at that point can step up and require some form of additional verification, be it a live phone call, it could be an ID scan. There's various different things that you can do at that point. And also confirm whatever change is being made via an alternate channel. Typically, we would recommend email. So if a transaction is happening, go ahead and send an email to the user letting them know that this transaction has happened or is about to happen. So that way, if it's a fraudster, the user will hopefully see that email very, very quickly and be able to let you know that that is a fraudulent transaction so you can stop it. So those are the best ways at this point to mitigate that type of fraud. And on the left here, you can see an example of some SIM swap data coming back from actually one of our APIs. It shows you the last date and time that the SIM was swapped for this particular phone number that was entered in. And then you also get a risk indicator to tell you that this, in this case, is not risky at all versus a higher risk indicator. All right, and the last one, exploit number 3, exploiting financial aggregators. This one is, I think, the newest that I've seen so far. So basically the way that it works is, you guys are probably familiar with these financial aggregators. You go online, you put in your bank account credentials for a bunch of different bank accounts, and they aggregate all of the information together and sort of give you your financial picture. Again, I'm not going to call out any in particular. You guys can probably figure out the names of some of these companies. And what the fraudsters do, again, very creative, they open their own aggregator accounts. They obtain victims' bank account credentials, so the username and password to log into a bank account. At that point, though, they typically can't do much with just the credentials because they have to do a two-factor authentication. They don't have access to the phone number. So they need another way to exploit this data that they have, these credentials. So what they do is they go to the financial aggregator and they tie this bank account information to the aggregator. And a lot of people would think, okay, like, big deal. They're able to see your information, they're able to see your financial information, which is, pretty disturbing. Like, it's not great that someone can see that, but there's nothing they can really do. They can't make any transactions, right? So what they do at that point is some financial aggregators, in some cases, will show the full account number in the aggregation software. So at that point, the fraudster has been able to view your account number. And then they also display all of the transactions. So what the fraudster does is they will go to the fraudster's bank account and link your account, or the victim's account, to their bank account. And how do they do this? They use the bank account number that they got from the financial aggregator. They find the routing number online. They're typically pretty easy to find if you know the name of the bank. And then once they've done that, their bank will send verification transactions to link the accounts, to make sure that they are linking an account that they have access to. Well, the fraudster is now able to see these verification transactions in the financial aggregator software. So they go and they see these verification transactions, they enter in the correct amounts, and then they're able to link the accounts and start, doing bad things, transferring money, which is obviously not ideal. And you can see an example here on the right of these verification transactions. And then mitigation, a few things, pretty obvious. Don't send the full account numbers, so they can't link the account in the first place. Combine the verification amounts if possible. So rather than showing, when you're sending them to the financial aggregators, rather than showing the two different verification amounts, show a combined amount. So that way the fraudster doesn't have access to this information. And then require 2FA, two-factor authentication, both on initial setup when setting up and linking the account in the aggregator software in the first place. And then anytime the user logs in again to transmit data, go ahead and require 2FA again. And you can see here on the left, I blurred out any sensitive information, but you can see a financial aggregator actually asking for certain bank accounts for two-factor authentication when pulling down the information, even, once it's already been linked. This is just once logging in again, pulling down the information through the service. So those are the 3 types of fraud and ways to mitigate them. And thank you very much for joining.